Hello and welcome to the School Safety Free Period. I'm Amanda Klinger.
And I'm Dr. Amy Klinger.
We're the founders and directors of the Educators School Safety Network. We're a national nonprofit and we provide educator-focused school safety, professional development resources, and technical assistance to K-12 schools throughout the U.S. and Canada. You can find us at www.eschoolsafety.org. In our daily work as trainers and researchers, we typically take a fairly studious and serious approach to the critical work of school safety and violence prevention. However, in this, our school safety free period, we're a little less formal, we're a little less academic, and a lot more fun. It says a little here in the script, but I'm going to say a lot more fun. We examine school safety issues and current events in a more informal, conversational fashion. So let's get started. What do you have for us today?
Well, I'm trying to do all the things better in the podcast because I'm told that I cough and I talk louder than you and my computer notifications keep going off. So I've tried to fix all those things. So I'm very zen.
I don't want to add to the list, but as I've been trying to take the podcast and chop it up into smaller video for other forms like TikTok and Reels, it's hard to do because we both talk over each other quite a bit. So I think we should, when one of us is talking, while we're still talking and making a point, we should raise our hands, and then when we're done, put our hands down, and then the other one talk, or maybe like a talking stick or something.
Put your hands over your mouth.
Yeah, we need something.
Talking.
Yeah, we need something.
See, I just did it right then. This is terrible. We are not. Okay, so it's my turn to talk. Is that how we'll do it?
Yeah, I think maybe less on the meta-analysis of the podcast and maybe start with the content of what you wanted to cover today.
Right. So yeah, I did. Actually, a week or so ago, actually last weekend, we had a really great event with a speaker who we then featured in our podcast. If you listened to our episode last week, we did one kind of on the fly with Dr. Michelle Kazari. I think I said her name finally correctly. And she was talking about fear in the principalship, and her area of research and study is about fear.
And if you haven't listened to that episode yet, pause this one, go back to last week and listen to that one, and then come back.
Just come back, sure. But anyways, so in the evaluation, one of the attendees made a comment about how it was so great to hear someone talk about the quiet part out loud in terms of talking about fear in administration, educational administration. And she talks about a number of different fears: the fear of failure, the fear of making a bad decision, the fear of being viewed as an imposter. And we really talked in that last episode about how that sort of flows across the whole school safety conversation. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to hit a little bit on this quiet part out loud kind of thing, which I think is a little different than the sort of militant, I'm going to speak truth to power sort of thing, but rather more the idea that we're being much more authentic and less posturing, and also being inquisitive or having inquiry about the wondering of, can I say this thing? Can I say this thing that maybe we're not supposed to think about or talk about or admit? So I wanted to talk a little bit about that in terms of school safety.
Yeah, I think sometimes we kind of, the other way to kind of frame that is thinking of, does anyone else feel kind of like whatever, fill in the blank? And I think that's maybe a common feeling in other parts of education. Like, does anyone else feel like we're spending so much time on this thing that's not important and I don't have time to do the things that are critically needed? But, that I think that framework is definitely true, is definitely the case in terms of school safety. And we see that when we work with school districts, that, after, we'll work with leadership teams and we'll do professional development, and we'll invariably have a teacher who will come up to us and say, I thought I was the only one who thought that these drills were too scary and intense, and why were we doing them? Or I thought I was the only one that said, sure, we have to prepare for an active shooter, but I'm concerned about this thing, this risk or hazard that's, staring me in the face every day. And I wonder, what does that look like to give each other sort of the permission structure of like, I feel like we always say like there's no stupid questions, but yet there must be a pervasive feeling that some questions or some concerns or some wonderings, like you said, are stupid because people really hold them so close to the vest until they've been given sort of that space to go, yeah, you know what? I also don't want to do a drill where I just scare, the living daylights out of my kids, and I want to practice skills with them.
Well, I think it leads to a lot of assumptions. So I thought maybe we could take it from like the most basic to, maybe across the continuum. So the one that makes me that we have experienced that I think is sort of this most basic border or foundational one. We will talk oftentimes about effective communication in a crisis response, and we'll say, "Do you know how to call 911 from your classroom phone?"
Yeah.
Because that is, in many cases, the preference of first responders because they can trace it directly back, even if you're not talking and you're just dialing 911 and dropping the phone. And there is this assumption, this baseline of everyone going, well, of course I can know how to call 911. I'm supposed to know how to call 911 from my classroom phone. And then sometimes you get someone that will say the quiet part out loud, which is, well, don't we have to dial 1 and then 911? Then someone else says, no, it's 8. And then we suddenly get...
And then the IT person chimes in and says, it used to be that you had to dial an 8. And for all the other calls, you have to dial an 8. But we changed it for 911. You just dial 911. And everybody else goes, oh, I didn't know that had been updated.
Yeah, no one was willing, or very few people are willing to say the quiet part out loud, which is, I don't know for sure. But clearly I must be the only person that thinks that. And then as soon as they say, or that doesn't know, and then as soon as they say that quiet part, then you begin to get more and more and more. And then you have this critical mass. We always tell this story in our trainings, but we did a training for an entire school staff in a smaller school. And we talked about this issue. And then we went to lunch and had a break. And as all the teachers went back to their rows and then went to the meal, law enforcement came, screaming into the, in a high rate of speed, put it that way, into the campus, came in and said, what's happening, that they had 15 911 hangups from the school. Why? Because everybody went back not wanting to say the quiet part out loud. Everybody went back and secretly tried to figure out, how do I actually call 911? Which was not an effective way of training, number one. So you still are not 100% sure how to call 911. But more significantly, you've still created this pervasive attitude that if you don't know how to do something, you're the only one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think we see that a lot with, when we're in schools and we see the emergency operations plan or the flip charts or the signage is very inconsistent and out of date. And I think sometimes it's something that's not on people's radar, right? The sign that's hanging in my classroom is from, last updated in 2004 or earlier, because we've seen way earlier. And I think sometimes it's not on people's radar, but I think sometimes I know that should have been updated and I probably was supposed to do it. And I don't want to tell on myself that I didn't update it and now it's too late. That sort of feeling of like, oh, this, friend of a friend, and I should have known their name and now it's too late to ask what their name is. That feeling of I should have known this, I should have fixed this, I should have updated this, and now it's too late. And so, we always sort of recommend to leadership teams about having that signage being refreshed every year, of people sign it out and sign it in at the beginning and the end of the school year. And maybe you don't have to reprint the signs because nothing has changed. Maybe you don't need to reprint the evacuation routes, but that notion of we touch this every year, everyone does. Everyone looks at it and we just double check it and we make sure they're in the right spot. We make sure they're accurate. And most importantly, we've thrown away all of the old out of date stuff, because that I think is a really pervasive and damaging problem when half the building is still using the signs from 3 models ago when we were doing this and the language was this and then this was this. And then some places, over in the math wing, we've updated all the signage, and no one's embarrassed. People are too embarrassed to say.
And the quiet part, which isn't said in that, is that I don't have any ownership in what's happening in emergency response. That's the quiet part that nobody's saying out loud. The signage, the emergency prep, all that stuff is somebody else's problem or someone else's expertise, not mine. So that is a quiet part that's not said out loud. And then you go all the way up to, the quiet part that's not said out loud about concerns that we have about students, or, saying, I must be the only one that can't handle this kid. I must be the only one that thinks this is weird, or that thinks this is concerning. And so no one says the quiet part out loud, oftentimes because of external factors involving that kid. We don't want to deal with the parents. There is a relationship or a connection that I don't want to say anything about. So that whole quiet part can extend from, this base level of, I don't know how to call 911, all the way up to, I have this student, we don't have a mechanism such as threat assessment or behavioral threat assessment. We don't have a mechanism by which I can, because it does give you, having a formalized structure like threat assessment gives you permission to say the quiet part out loud in a supportive, professional environment, rather than just whispering about it in the parking lot to your friend at school.
I think the other part about Dr. Kazari's work that I think is so resonant with people is understanding the sort of like complex emotional landscape that all this stuff takes place in. And I think that's, and I think she really speaks about that in a way that's really compelling. I think in terms of school safety, that's something that maybe sometimes we don't fully confront head on. That, the work of school safety and the work of educators in terms of school safety is sort of a uniquely complex emotional landscape. If, a teacher missed a professional development about the attendance system, or not to belittle the importance of academics, but if a teacher, messes something up about a specific, instructional technique, the stakes are potentially a little bit lower than some of the school safety stuff, where there is sort of that feeling, that sort of sinking feeling in the background that like some of this stuff is life or death. I don't feel like I've been adequately prepared. I don't feel like I feel very confident in my skills and capabilities. I feel guilty, like maybe it's my fault. Maybe I didn't pay attention to something, or maybe I didn't do something. And then maybe the reality is that stuff was never provided to you, or was never done effectively, or was never done consistently. And that because it's such an emotionally laden topic, everyone, instead of going, hold on, I don't have an updated sign, and that they sort of retreat. And that's that it becomes, how does something become the quiet part? Because of the fear and the potential guilt of, maybe I should have known that, but maybe no one told me, or maybe it was my fault. And that the stakes feel so high.
Or the feeling that the prioritization is different. I'm feeling like this is a priority, but no one else, but maybe I think no one else does. And I think with very few exceptions, saying the quiet part out loud takes courage, but is almost always beneficial. Almost always. Where you're saying, other than if you're saying, wow, those pants look terrible on you. Other than that, the quiet parts that you're saying typically are to the benefit of more than just you, that there's other people that are feeling that way and are not able to say it. So it is a little bit of sort of a courageous kind of thing. Now, I want to finish by putting us both on the spot and going, okay, what is the quiet part about school safety that you want to say out loud? I've got mine.
Mine would be, more often than not, it's not a school safety issue, it's a leadership issue. It's not that people...
Someone very wise.
Someone very wise. It's not that people don't care about school safety. It's not that people don't think it's important. It's not that people are unwilling to confront their very reasonable fears about the worst things that could happen. More and more often than not, it is a problem of being able to operationalize and sustain this work in a way that makes sense. And there's a lot of demands. I get why it happens. There's a lot of demands on people's time, and there's an intense focus on this, and then we go back to our normal jobs. So I would say the quiet part is this: the reason that we haven't solved school safety is because we haven't been able to operationalize it and have some of the tough conversations of like, get out here and do your supervision duty.
So it's not that we don't know what to do or we can't afford it, we don't have time.
And those are all contributing factors, right? But those all make the crux of the problem, which is operationalizing it and the leadership to do so. All of those things make that more difficult, but that I see sometimes that's the crux of the problem.
Okay, that one's good. I'd agree with that.
All right, what's yours?
Okay, mine, let's just put it out there. When I'm all done saying it, you're going to go, oh, you sound like you're 80. So let's just get that out of the way. I'm not 80, but I will sound like it. Mine, the quiet part out loud, is I know in education, I know we love our MacBooks and our Chromebooks and our one-to-one initiatives and our smart boards and how our kids can use their phones to do research. And I know we love, 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 love our screens and our TVs hanging in the hallways and in the cafeteria, and a screen and a screen and a screen and a screen. And here in the preschool, we have a big screen and I know it. But the quiet part I will say out loud is there is a cost when everything we do revolves around a screen, when we are severing the relationships and we are not talking to kids because we're putting them in front of the screen, which is what they just left when they left home, was a screen. And when they get back home, they'll see a screen. And then the place that should not have all these screens, unfortunately, there is a cost, and there is a cost in the relationship and in the social and emotional cost to kids, and that contributes to violence and threats in schools. So my quiet part out loud is the screens may make you think you're doing a great thing, but there's a cost.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. Well, we'll leave it there. I think the one last thing I wanted to add when we talked about how it's so courageous, to say the quiet part out loud. I think, what does that look like to create space for people to say the quiet part out loud? And then what does that look like to sort of receive that, not as a critique, right? Someone says the quiet part out loud. I don't think we've ever updated these signs, to not receive that as a critique, but to have that be a call to action. And I
even ask for the quiet part.
Yeah.
What am I missing? What are we not saying? What have we not talked about in regards to our signs or our procedures? And that goes back to yours of leadership, having the leadership to walk that a few steps back and say, what are we missing? Mm-hmm. What did I not talk about? What am I assuming that that maybe you don't? Mm-hmm. And asking for people to say that quiet part.
Mm-hmm. And that's courageous. That's courageous from leadership, and it's courageous from other folks, to speak up. And I think it takes courage on both sides for that to be effective and not just conflict. So, well, thank you. Do you have something else?
No, I was going to say, so now the quiet part out loud is we're done. Yeah.
There you go. Well, thank you so much for joining us. You can find more information on our website, www.eschoolsafety.org. So thank you so much. Until next time.